Hey there, today we're going to be taking a log like this and turning it into a stirring spoon. So right here I have a lot of the things that you're going to need to make this. I've cut the piece of wood first. Here is an example of what the spoon will end up looking like in the end. A hook knife. I picked one of my more easily available hook knives found on eBay. We have the Moro 106. Down here we have our hatchet, and then you're just going to need a splitting tool. So I have my wooden mallet right here and my secondary hatchet, but obviously you guys can use your primary hatchet for splitting. It doesn't really matter. So I'm coming down with release cuts. I split the piece of wood. There is a slight corkscrew to the way that the grain had moved through the wood. So before I do anything else, I'm going to flatten out this piece as much as I can and see if it's even salvageable. Making sure that I can get it smooth and flat. I like to start off by flattening one area of the wood and then working around that section to make sure that I can get other pieces to move to where that is as well. All right, so this has become relatively flat. I don't need it to be perfectly flat in all dimensions. And it lets me see that I have at least enough area to put a bowl into the piece of wood. And that's the main important factor when creating this kind of spoon. I don't want knots throughout the entire thing. These are gonna be on the handle on either side that I put it, but they're not really gonna get in the way. If they were in these spots, then it's gonna be really hard to carve your bowl out of the spoon, and it's gonna make it either too much of a challenge, or sometimes it'll make it so it's even impossible to get a good spoon bowl. So now what I'm going to do is draw in the base design. I like to think of it as a lollipop. If I put the spoon opening on this side, my handle would curve backwards just because of the way that the grain of the wood goes. However, if I put it on this side, the handle will curve slightly up on average. And that is a better positioning for your spoon handle to be than to have it be basically tipping all of the liquid or all of the food out of the spoon. After I have started, I'm gonna finish up just making a circle around. Now I'm gonna use the edge of the piece of wood and my finger. It's a little crooked, but that's fine. Just getting yourself your general idea. Go down and then make it a little bit wider. If you have the handle that's off to one side and you cut down to split off extra wood, you're gonna catch the grain of the wood and you're gonna split off your drawn handle if your handle is drawn crooked. I have drawn this a little bit crooked, so I'm gonna go in and fix it up. I personally just make a little bit of a darker line. This is my rough outline, my rough guideline, and I can work off of this. So now the first step in getting this spoon out of the wood is to take my hatchet and to cut away and cut as close to the pencil line as I feel comfortable. The longer you do this, the closer you can get. The more complicated the design, the further away I tend to stay, but as you get more comfortable with each of them, you're gonna be able to get closer and closer. So you start off, release cuts. Now I don't like to go up to where the bowl of the spoon is on this side, just in case something happens and I catch the top and I cut straight through it. Flip it over. Now from here, you can't always see the design, so I just like to move it back and forth often to double check where everything is at. What I want to be doing is I want to be working the back of the spoon a little bit to just sort of even it out. Oftentimes when you have the wood on the outside of your spoon or the top side of your spoon, the wood is going to be bowed out on the back, and you're going to look at it and see yourself with more wood than you actually have to work with, And I've definitely messed myself up with that. So you always want to make sure that you're taking off the bark at this stage, just to make sure your pencil lines are in the right spot and you're not going to lose too much of the wood as you're working and end up with something that's significantly smaller than what you initially set out for. Right now, what I need to do is I need to set the shoulders of the spoon. So in order to do that, I'm laying it flat down or at a little bit of an angle depending upon the style and how comfortable you are. It's like bending over your spoon. And what I'm doing is I'm flicking my fingers at my hatchet. And this will pull the hatchet in, but also keep me safe. If I was swinging and I chopped and I bounced, it's hitting me in the fingers. But if I miss, even if I don't use anything, I'm nowhere near my fingers. And that's what makes this chop preferable. Now I've gone on a little bit and I come back from the other angle. That one I can have a little bit more power with because it's not going towards my hand. I can pick up the spoon itself to get a better angle in there. As I'm making the shoulder, it's really important to go slow. Don't be afraid to flick pieces out with your hatchet. That'll just help you get past something that you can't see. You can't really see where you're at, how deep you are, what might happen when all the excess carvings are in the way. All right. So now I've gotten my shoulders in, and now I just need to clear away this excess. I can come in from the top, make sure that I notice how far in the cuts go, and don't go any further in towards the handle. And once I get there, I'm doing little bump cuts. And what this does is it prevents me from accidentally cutting off half my spoon bowl. Otherwise, what can happen is you cut too far and you either end up cutting into the back of the spoon bowl and starting off with a micro crack that can build up and become bigger over time, or you cut the side of the spoon bowl straight off and you've lost that spoon. All right, so from here, I'm going to round out the back to make it so that it's more spoon-like and get it in preparation for the next stage of carving. And I'm also going to take off these edges and then shorten the back. So I'm coming in from here, I'm cutting it in basically 3 sides. I have the right corner, the left corner, and then the middle. To round out the back, all I'm going to be doing is angling the spoon and coming down basically in the same spot with my hatchet. So I start off at very shallow, and then I just turn it more and more and more and more. Sometimes I have to move my hatchet just a little bit just to get it into those right spots. Okay, so now we're basically getting down to the carving stage. Starting off just pulling around here to get the neck of the spoon established. Making sure that the neck of the spoon is established is something that's really important, because if you don't have that established and you don't know where it is, a lot of the times what ends up happening is you end up with this really sharp transition from spoon bowl to handle. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it can be on purpose, but a lot of the times when it's a mistake, it becomes a really weak point in your spoon itself the entire time. As I go around the outside, I'm using the thumb push technique and just sliding from the base of my blade up through about the middle, and that gives me the most power as I go around. And throughout this point in the back, I switch between that and the chest cleaver. And those are basically the 2 power strokes that let you get the spoon bowl shape established, I guess I can say. So now I keep carving through, trying to make sure that I smooth out the transition so that it's not too sharp, but I don't want to work it so much that I take away from it and then make it weak. Sometimes I'll just make the other corner a little bit sharper, just so that I don't have to carve away too much extra wood. Now to get this to be the right length, got the chest cleaver, or chest lever. Pull through there. If you're not as confident in this, you can use the push technique. This one works as well. It doesn't really, I wouldn't say it matters too much which one you use. It's more of a personal preference, at least when it comes to the handle. In areas like the back, the spoon bowl, I'd say the chest lever is better because it's such a small area. Like you can get it with this, but you're using a lot more, and it's such a small section you want to be able to really see what you're doing. So having it so close to your face gives you that extra ability to see where everything's going. We're essentially done with this stage, just the arbitrary shaping. So now it's time for the hook knife. Hook knife technique is squeezing your hand so that you're closing it. And what that does is it rocks the blade so that it doesn't end up carving into you. If I was just pulling straight back, if that was possible, like pulling like this, it goes into your thumb. You also want to place your thumb as close to the back or as far back as you can, holding either this way or this way, depending upon which way is easier for you. And I usually like to rest it against something. And then you can start carving off large sections. I'm working my way across, and now I have ridges. And it's always easier to carve off a ridge than it is to carve off a plane. So when I'm trying to round something out or trying to smooth an area out, I'll find those ridges and make each ridge smaller and smaller. As I go around, sometimes I'll pop my entire hand off, and that's just to make sure that my thumb doesn't get carved into. Working around the front of the spoon bowl, that's probably, I would say, one of the hardest parts. And in this area, because it becomes so thin, you want to make sure that you're really staying focused and maybe even get a light from the side so that you can actually see where your edges, where your shadows are. Those shadows will really be helpful. And what I'm doing now is I'm carving with the grain, and this gives a finishing cut. So as I'm going through, I'm rocking forward, keeping my finger as that fulcrum point. And as I build up these little pieces in here, I flip it around, come to the other side, start doing the same thing, but this time I peel the back layers into the front so that they start to come off. One little carve that goes from 3 to 9 basically on your spoon. So it'll carve straight across, and that'll be what smooths out the middle of your spoon. So now the inside of the spoon bowl is carved, and I just want to shore up the outside of it. Make it so that it fits the shape of the spoon, and make sure that it'll end up looking good, and the sides will be smooth. They won't have this excess bark on it. From here, what I'm doing is this end is a little bit wonky, so I don't want that. I'm gonna carve that around, make it smooth. I'm gonna take this handle from being thin on this side and fat on this side to pretty much round. It's got a little bit of a bump back here, so I'm going to take that away and then just smooth up the entire edge of the spoon itself. The different techniques I'm going to use as I go through are the reinforced pull stroke, the thumb push. I'll use the chest lever a little bit. Probably not going to use the hard push stroke from the side of my body anymore, just because I have very little control with that, and I don't want to accidentally carve off way too much. If I go too far and I start to feel something pull, just come from the other angle and make sure that you don't accidentally carve off too much, especially around the back of the bowl. If you carve off the back of the bowl and it goes onto the inside of the bowl, then you just have a hole in your spoon, and you either have to make up an excuse on why it's there, or we're gonna have to restart. When carving off the tip, you always want to make sure that you start with bigger planes and then work into smaller and smaller ones. The knife pull technique, no assisted hands. Sometimes it's easier to do that, and that'll just be dependent upon what stage of the carving you're doing. This lets me adjust the angle of the spoon more, so I'm not going to have my hand there because I'm rotating the spoon as I go. Now I'm catching the edge of the spoon bowl, getting rid of that excess bark. Bark's not going to be comfortable if someone were to use it in their mouth. Granted, this is mostly just a stirring spoon, something for tea and things like that, but you know, a spoon's a spoon. If you have a spoon, you need something, you're just gonna pick it up and grab it. Sometimes I have to support it against my leg, and that'll be a lot easier than trying to support it entirely in my hand. It lets my hand be a little bit further away and safer. Assisted pull strokes give you a smaller distance that you are going to travel and makes it good for those tight spots. The pull stroke is great for the handle, the assisted pull stroke is good for the bowl. The spoon is done, more or less. You can always carve more, you can carve it until it's nothing, but you don't want to do that. So I always like to stop with a little bit extra to carve away and then give it a few days. Come back to it, look it over, see if there's anything I really want to carve, anything I really want to change, or if I like the little imperfections that it has. So as a review, what you're doing is you split your branch, then you're gonna flatten it out, make it so that you know where you can get your spoon and where you can get your handle. You draw in your design for that, then you carve away basically just the handle part, then you round out where the spoon bowl is. After that, you're going to go to your finishing carvings or your mid-stage carvings, depending upon how green the wood is. So you carve out the bowl, carve off the back, the handle, whatever you feel comfortable starting off with. Everybody has their own style once they start to figure out how they like to carve things. Then your finishing steps are just making sure that the spoon handle feels comfortable. You don't want any ragged spots, like I found one right here, so I'm going to carve that off later. And just want to make sure that it looks good. And if you look at everything from the side, you want to make sure that it's pretty flat. You want to, with your first few spoons that you're not giving anybody, give it the mouth test. Just put it in your mouth and test it out, see if it feels good in there. And once you know what is a comfortable spoon, then you'll start to be able to just carve them without having to double check it. So thank you guys for watching this video. You can like below and tell me if this helped you make it, or just give me a comment, whatever you want. You can follow me on Instagram, Glenn P. Art. You can follow me on Facebook, ask me questions, and just sort of see where I'm at in my everyday. You can also continue to follow this channel, subscribe to it, figure out what you can do with your spoon carvings as I continue to put out videos to help you guys learn as much as you can. So I hope you guys like this, and I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.